Okay, so I want you to take a second and picture the food pyramid. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's probably burned into your retinas from, I don't know, elementary school cafeterias, the back of a cereal box,
Absolutely. That giant base of bread and pasta.
the massive reassuring brick at the bottom right.
Huh.
Bread, cereal, rice, and pasta. What was it, 6 to 11 servings a day?
It was the blueprint. I mean, we built school lunch programs, hospital menus, everything around the idea that grains were the fuel.
Exactly. Now, I want you to imagine walking up to that pyramid and just flipping it upside down.
A whole thing.
The whole thing. The point is now at the bottom, balancing precariously. And here's where it gets really interesting. That isn't a metaphor. As of January 7, 2026, that inverted triangle is the official nutrition policy of the United States.
It is a complete visual shock to the system. We're looking at the 2026-2030 Federal Nutrition Policy Reset. Came out jointly from HHS and the USDA.
Undersecretaries Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Brooke Rollins.
Right, and honestly, calling it a reset feels like a massive understatement.
It feels more like a controlled demolition. Our mission today is to figure out what's actually driving this. We keep hearing the slogan, Make America Healthy Again, or MAHA, but there's a really specific philosophy here.
There is. The documents frame this as a shift away from generalized caloric balance, which is the old calories in, calories out model, to something they call targeted metabolic intervention. The government is basically admitting that the old way wasn't just ineffective. They're arguing it actually contributed to the current health crisis.
Yeah, and the stats they cite for that crisis are grim. I knew things were bad, but seeing it laid out in a federal document, 75% of American adults are overweight or obese.
Half the population has prediabetes or diabetes.
And 90% of our healthcare spending goes to chronic disease. It's staggering.
It is. The administration calls this the overfed but undernourished phenomenon. Their argument is that the old pyramid incentivized cheap processed calories that just wrecked our metabolic health.
So this document, it's not just advice. It's written like a national emergency response plan.
That's exactly the tone.
So let's get into the visual revolution, because I think that's where this hits home for most people. This inverted triangle. The widest part at the top, the VIP section, it's completely different. What's sitting there now?
This is the foundation tier. And yeah, if you're nostalgic for the pasta-heavy 90s, this is going to hurt. The new foundation is protein, dairy, and healthy fats.
So what are we seeing? What are the icons?
Steak, ground beef, chicken, salmon, eggs, butter, and whole milk.
Wait, butter and steak are the foundation.
That's the new foundation?
It looks less like a government chart and more like a menu at a high-end steakhouse.
Well, that's a deliberate choice, right? A semiotic choice. They want to signal a complete break from the past.
Okay, so below that.
You have the essential tier, which is vegetables and fruits. They're still critical, obviously, but visually, they're secondary in volume to the animal products.
And then crushed all the way down at the very bottom point.
Whole grains, the minimalist tier. The recommendation has dropped from that famous 6 to 11 servings.
Down to what?
Just 2 to 4. The message is crystal clear. Grains are no longer the volumetric base of the American diet.
That is a massive pivot, but I want to dig into this phrase that keeps popping up in the text. Real food. It sounds great. I mean, who doesn't want real food? But in a regulatory document, definitions matter. How are they defining real?
They define it mostly by what it's not. Real food means items with very few ingredients, no added sugars, and this is key, no industrial oils.
So no soybean oil, canola, that kind of thing.
Exactly, and that's a dual-purpose definition. It's partly about health, yes, but it's explicitly written to support domestic farmers and ranchers over industrial food manufacturers.
So it's economic policy dressed up as health advice.
You could certainly see it that way.
Okay, let's look at the protein explosion, because the numbers here made me do a double take. The old guidelines were basically just about preventing deficiency, right?
Right. The old RDA was about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So for most people, maybe 50 grams a day. Just enough to keep you from wasting away.
And the new target.
They've moved to what they call an optimization standard. The new target is 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight.
Okay, let's contextualize that, because per kilogram is hard to visualize.
For sure.
So if you have a 200-pound man, that's about 90 kilograms. At the high end, 1.6 grams, he needs nearly 145 grams of protein a day.
A day. It's a tremendous amount of food. You basically have to prioritize protein at every single meal to hit that number.
So why? What's the rationale they cite for such a huge jump?
It's fascinating. They're targeting two things. Sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss.
This angle. How does eating 145 grams of protein help with blood sugar?
It's about satiety and the insulin response. So if you eat a carb-heavy breakfast, like a bagel and juice.
Your blood sugar spikes and then you crash.
Exactly, and you're hungry 2 hours later. But if you eat steak and eggs, the protein and fat give you a slow, steady fuel burn. You aren't looking for a snack at 10 a.m. The government is betting this will naturally lower total calorie intake without people having to count.
But there has to be a trade-off, right? You can't just triple protein and minimize grains without losing something.
And that is exactly what the critics are pointing out, specifically researchers from the Stanford School of Medicine. The issue is fiber. The document mentions proteins 17 times. It mentions fiber twice.
Oof, that's a very lopsided ratio for a nutrition policy.
It is. The concern is the microbiome. Whole grains have been the main delivery vehicle for fiber in the American diet for decades. If you slash them to a minimalist tier and you don't dramatically increase your vegetable intake, which, let's be honest, most people won't, you risk starving your gut bacteria.
So we might end up muscular, but with a very unhappy digestive system.
That is the crude but accurate fear. In the war on carbs, the microbiome might be collateral damage.
Speaking of things that run contrary to everything we've been told, let's talk dairy. I grew up in the era where skim milk was responsible and whole milk was a guilty pleasure.
And fat-free cheese was a health food.
Right. But the 2026 guidelines effectively declare the fat-free era dead. They recommend 3 servings of full-fat dairy daily.
And this isn't just a suggestion. It's already being codified into law. The Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act of 2025 was signed just days after these guidelines dropped.
So schools are changing immediately.
Yes. Schools in the National School Lunch Program are now required to offer whole and 2% milk. The milk mustache is back, and it is full fat.
What's the nutritional logic there? I thought we were worried about childhood obesity.
The argument is about bioavailability. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat-soluble. You need fat to absorb them.
Okay, that makes sense.
So with skim milk, you get the calcium, but you might not be absorbing those vitamins as well. Plus, there's the practical argument kids hate skim milk.
It does taste a bit like whitewater.
Exactly. The dairy lobby has argued for years that millions of gallons of it just get thrown in the trash. So the logic is, better they drink whole milk and get the nutrients than throw away the healthy option.
Okay, so more meat, more butter, more whole milk. This brings us to the part of the deep dive that actually gave me a headache. I'm calling it the saturated fat paradox. It's a math problem that literally cannot be solved.
I know exactly where you're going with this. It's the biggest internal conflict in the entire document.
So, on one hand, the guidelines are enthusiastically promoting butter, tallow, red meat. But then I looked at the nutrient limits, and they kept the cap on saturated fat at 10% of daily calories.
Which, for a standard 2,000-calorie diet, is about 22 grams of saturated fat per day.
Right, so I did some quick math on a hypothetical MAHA-compliant day. Let's say I cook my eggs in 1 tablespoon of butter, that's 7 grams of saturated fat. I have a snack of 1 ounce of cheddar cheese, that's 6 more grams. I drink 1 cup of that recommended whole milk, that's 5 grams.
So you're already at 18 grams and you haven't even had dinner.
Exactly. Then for dinner, I have a very modest 4-ounce sirloin steak. That's another 5 grams total, 23 grams. I've broken the federal limit, and I was trying to follow the rules.
This is what the American Heart Association is calling an impossible prescription. It promotes the foods that contain the fat, but statistically forbids the nutrient itself. It's like telling someone to go swimming, but making it illegal to get wet.
Why would they release a document that contradicts itself so blatantly?
Well, it reflects the tension between 2 warring scientific camps. You have the food-based camp saying whole, natural foods are healthy regardless of their components. Then you have the nutrient-based camp that says saturated fat raises LDL cholesterol, period.
And the guidelines try to please both and end up pleasing no one.
Exactly. The AHA and the American College of Cardiology are genuinely worried this mixed message will just cause confusion and spike cholesterol levels.
While they're embracing these natural fats, they are absolutely going to war against highly processed foods. This seems to be the one area where there is zero ambiguity.
Explicitly so. They define highly processed foods, chips, cookies, white bread, soda as the enemy. But they go further than just saying eat less. They're targeting the chemical structure of these foods.
I saw the list. Artificial flavors, petroleum-based dyes.
Right.
But the one that really shocked me was the stance on low-calorie sweeteners.
Yeah, that's a big one.
For decades, Diet Coke was seen as the responsible choice if you were watching your weight.
Not anymore. The guidelines state no amount of non-nutritive sweeteners is recommended. Aspartame, sucralose, all of it. The government now views them as industrial additives that disrupt the gut microbiome.
That is a huge shift. So they would rather you have real sugar.
Yes, but with a very tight leash. They've introduced the 10-gram rule, no more than 10 grams of added sugar per meal.
That is not a lot. That's like 2 teaspoons.
It's tiny. The goal is to prevent those massive insulin spikes. And for kids under 4, the recommendation is 0 added sugar, none.
If you're a parent, you know that is incredibly hard. You pick up a yogurt, it has 12 grams. A granola bar, 15 grams.
And that's where the implementation comes in. This isn't just advice anymore. This is where we get to SNP and WIC.
Right. This is where it becomes consequential economically. We're talking about billions in federal spending.
Correct. The USDA has already approved waivers for 18 states, places like Indiana, Louisiana, Florida, to restrict junk food purchases with SNAP benefits.
How does that actually work at the grocery store? Does the cashier have to police your cart?
No, it's all automated. The point-of-sale systems are being updated to flag and block specific products. So if you try to buy a 2-liter of soda or a bag of candy with your SNAP card, the transaction just won't clear for those items.
Wow. That turns the grocery checkout into a regulatory checkpoint.
It does. And it creates very clear winners and losers in the food industry. The winners are obviously the livestock and dairy sectors. They are thrilled.
And the losers.
The soybean and canola sectors, because industrial seed oils are out. And of course, the big packaged food manufacturers, they're in a total panic.
They must be scrambling to reformulate everything.
They're facing an existential threat. They either clean up the ingredients to meet the new standards, or they lose access to millions of customers who rely on federal food programs.
Now, we have to address the elephant in the room. Usually these guidelines come from a pretty boring bureaucratic process. A committee of scientists writes a report, the government stamps it, we move on. But it sounds like the administration went rogue on this one.
Rogue is one word for it. Here's the drama. The 2025 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, the top scientists appointed to do this, submitted their report. And that report recommended reducing red meat and keeping low-fat dairy.
So, the exact opposite of what actually got released.
Precisely. HHS and the USDA flat out rejected the committee's report. They claimed it was anti-meat and biased. So they basically commissioned their own scientific foundation rewrite to align with the MAHA philosophy.
That is highly unusual. I didn't even know they could just throw out the scientist report.
It is unprecedented in modern nutrition policy. The American Society for Nutrition is furious. They argue it lacks transparency and aligns way too closely with big meat and big dairy interests, ignoring decades of consensus on heart disease.
So on one side, you have this ancestral health movement cheering that we're finally eating real food. On the other, the established scientific community is screaming that we're setting ourselves up for a heart disease epidemic.
That's the tension. It's a clash between two completely different worldviews on human biology. Is the enemy saturated fat, or is the enemy processed food and sugar?
And the entire American public is now the sample group for this massive experiment.
We are the test subjects, yes.
It brings me to one final question, a question of access. We're telling people to eat steak, fresh salmon, high-quality butter, and we're banning the cheap shelf-stable stuff from SNAP.
Right.
So in a country where highly processed food is often the cheapest, and in some places the only option available is a real food mandate, really a path to national health? Or will it just become a luxury lifestyle that the average family and the school lunch budget simply cannot afford?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? Policy can change the pyramid on paper. But if we don't change the economics of the grocery store, that pyramid might just be a drawing on a wall that no one can actually afford to climb.
A lot to chew on. That's our deep dive on the 2026 Nutrition Reset. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.